Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into our first Big Blue Bracket Breakdown. I'm Tom Leach, and over the next about 60 minutes, we'll visit with you and take a look at Kentucky's bracket for the NCAA tournament, which will start actually tomorrow, Tuesday night, in Dayton, with the president watching Mississippi Valley State play Western Kentucky in the first four games. And the winner of that game will, of course, advance on to meet the Wildcats at the Yum Center in Louisville at 6:50 on Thursday night. Coming up during this hour, we're going to be talking with Brian Milam from the KYT staff, also Dave Baker. Dave was with us courtside down in New Orleans yesterday where Kentucky lost in the SEC tournament finals to Vanderbilt. My broadcast partner on the radio network, Mike Pratt, will join us during the show as well. And we're also asking for your tweets. You can follow me at Tom Leach, KY. And you can send tweets in with some thoughts about the bracket. We'll post some questions during the show. I've posted a tweet already asking for your thoughts on who's going to win the game tomorrow night between Mississippi Valley State and Western Kentucky up in Dayton. So at Tom Leach KY if you want to send those in. And this is the first time we're doing this live show online. The live streaming. So we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. We're going to experiment with some things. So we'll ask you to indulge if something doesn't quite work exactly like as seamlessly as you're used to seeing it working on the KYT newscasts. But I think we're going to have some fun with this over the next hour. Brian Milam has walked in. This is just kind of like doing a radio show, a live remote radio show, and somebody walks in. Hey, come here, sit down. Come here. Hey, you, come here, sit down, talk. First, we'll just start with the brackets. We're going to take a look at some things here in a moment graphically, but just right off the top, when these things were unveiled last night, what was your initial thought for Kentucky?
Well, I don't think I get into the conspiracy theory, first off, but I do think that, and I've always thought that the NCAA puts a lot of thought into this, not just 6 hours of a Sunday afternoon, because to have Kentucky in the same bracket with UConn, Indiana, and Duke, that's too much of a storyline for me. So I guess I will go with the conspiracy theory on that part. I think it's pretty tough.
Most of the analysts I've seen just in surfing around last night and today, I hear that a lot of people. It's not just in Kentucky that people are saying, national media people are saying it looks like Kentucky might have the toughest bracket.
And that's not supposed to be that way if you go by the number one overall seed. UConn, the team that beat them last year, is a lot better than a 9 seed, I think, when Jim Calhoun is on the bench. He went away for a few games. They fell apart. And I think he may have even rushed his rehab back a little bit just to say, hey, this team needs me. UConn, very dangerous. They play a physical style of basketball in the Big East, and that's what we've seen out of Kentucky, that sometimes they don't like to be pushed around. And I think UConn could do that if that's something that comes about. Wichita State has been the one team that a lot of people have said could be a sleeper to get to a Final Four or to an Elite Eight. So it's a very difficult bracket. You've got a dysfunctional Baylor team that could be world beaters one night and then lose to a 16 seed the next day, so to speak. I think it's pretty tough for Kentucky when you look at everybody else. I think that a lot of UK fans said, we want Duke. We want to see Duke. It's 20 years. Well, you're going to get Duke maybe if the bracket plays out.
Yeah, be it the first loss of this season or that game in '92 and the 20th anniversary. This is kind of a revenge bracket from a Kentucky standpoint.
And you could even get a Notre Dame possibly, and people love to hate Digger Phelps if you're a UK fan, which
that's always fun.
That's okay.
And
that's
deserved.
Okay. Yes.
We took a look at the overall number one seeds. And I think the committee got this right. Kentucky, Syracuse, North Carolina, Michigan State, the 4-1 seeds in the bracket that was unveiled. And then you look at Kentucky's potential path to the Final Four. Would start with Mississippi Valley State or Western Kentucky. A 1 seed's never lost to a 16 seed. I don't think it's going to happen this year either. Quick thought though on Western or MVSU, Sean Wood's team. Who gets past there?
Sean Wood's team has shown over the last half of the season they are a very good team for their level of play. Western has been riding the 6 games of emotion. And I think you go by maybe consistency, because emotion can leave you. Now Western will have had to sit for, a week and a half to play basketball. And Mississippi Valley State's won 20 of 21, I believe, something like that, 21 of 22. I think I kind of go with the consistency. Thank you, sir. I think I kind of go with the consistency of what you've done in the long haul. And I like Mississippi Valley State only because they've shown they are not just a one-week team. They've shown they're a three-month team by their level of play.
Then in the second round, it could be UConn or Iowa State. Iowa State is the higher seed, the 8. UConn's the 9. Iowa State's a three-point shooting team. UConn, athletic, physical team. I think you get Indiana or Wichita State perhaps in the round of 16, although you've got VCU, who made that improbable run to the Final Four last year, taking on Wichita State. I think Wichita State advances there. New Mexico State and Indiana, I think the Aggies, Tony Delk's an assistant there. I think that's a potential problem spot for Indiana right off the bat, simply because of the injury to Verdell Jones.
That's right. The injury could come as a psyche thing. Now it's also a physical thing because you lose a player. You also have to maybe rely on him in a certain situation. He's no longer there. And Indiana has shown that they are very beatable. They've shown that they can win at home, but they've shown they don't win as much on the road. So that could be one of those 4-13 traps where the last 4 years a 13 has beaten a 4. Last year with Moorhead beating Louisville.
Right.
So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the 4-13 upset this year. There's several others, but that could be one.
Wouldn't be shocked at all to see that. And then you'd get out. You could have Duke, Baylor, UNLV. We'll talk a little bit more about how it could look at the Elite Eight level in a moment. Let's get back to the first 2 or 3 games for Kentucky. As I said, I think they advanced with no problem on the first day, and then it could be Iowa State or UConn. Then it could be one of the teams we talked about. Had Jim O'Connell, longtime college basketball writer for the Associated Press, on the radio show on WLAP this morning, and he said when he first started this gig, he talked to people like Dave Gavitt and C.M. Newton about the NCAA tournament, and they were guys who headed up the committee at one point. And Jim said the thing they always told him is, don't worry so much about the numbers and what the computer prints out. Trust your eyes. Which team would you least like to play? And that's a team to be worried about in the NCAA tournament. And Jim said he thinks there are more of those kinds of teams in Kentucky's bracket than there are for the other 1 seeds. And he pointed to UConn and Wichita State and in Indiana as having each of them have one thing that we saw Vanderbilt give Kentucky problems with, and that's a big, strong guy inside. Festus Ezeli in the SEC tournament final. You've got UConn with Drummond, who's about 270. And you've got Cody Zeller up at Indiana, and he's the only guy that got Anthony Davis into deep foul trouble. And you've got the kid, his name escapes me, 7-footer for Wichita State.
Right.
That is another back-to-the-basket, low-post, physical score. And you saw Ezeli in that game in New Orleans bury Anthony under the basket at times just with his bulk, and then it neutralizes some of that shot-blocking ability. And there are those kinds of players Kentucky could have to face in their second or third games of this.
And we've seen Kentucky as a totally different team when Anthony Davis is on the bench. Throughout this entire season, when UK has struggled offensively against a pretty decent opponent, Davis has been in foul trouble, or he has not been given the ball in the post offensively. What was it the other night against LSU? He went 23 minutes without a basket. LSU gave Kentucky a lot of problems. Also, those teams, UConn with Jeremy Lamb, can shoot the 3 a little bit. Indiana has shown they can shoot the 3. Duke, that's all they do. It seemingly is shoot 3-pointers. And Notre Dame, should Kentucky face a team like them, very strong, very physical, plays the Big East brand of basketball. They're going to muddy the water. They're going to try to grind it out a little bit. So I think it's a very difficult bracket. You look at a Baylor team that's very long and athletic. They're kind of odd. You don't know who's going to show up. But in a tournament, all you need is 40 minutes. You don't need, an entire season to show what you can do. But this bracket for UK, I listen to other stations, radio stations, and I think, well, maybe it's not that bad. It's pretty tough when you break it down and really have a night to really think about all of the potential matchups that are there.
We're starting to get some tweets in. You can follow me at Tom Leach KY on Twitter. And one of the questions we've posed is, who do you like in the game in the first 4 tomorrow night up in Dayton between Western and Mississippi Valley State? Robert says it's a toss-up. I think Sean Woods gets to meet his alma mater, so Robert's picking the Delta Devils. Daniel says either team will get applause from Cat fans during the lineups. Hard to root against Sean Woods or Western Kentucky. Certainly, he's right, and it's going to be like a home game. These two games that Kentucky will likely play. I say likely, there's that fraction of a percent chance that the one seed's finally going to happen. But it's going to be two games in the Yum Center for Kentucky, and it's going to be like a home game. It's sold out. I'm sure mostly by Kentucky fans. Each school gets a few hundred tickets, but I would think most of the rest would have gone to Kentucky fans, and there will be a lot of appreciation for either Sean's team or the Hilltoppers, whoever gets there.
I would like to see personally in my heart see Western. My mother went to Western. It's a Kentucky thing. You keep those two of the state schools together. You also have a great postseason tradition with UK and Western. They've only met twice, but the big one in 71, people will bring up those storylines. Yeah. They met in 86, which was a pretty close ball game. But Western and facing UK and WKU, I think a lot of the Kentucky folks would like to see that just because you keep two schools together playing in the state of Kentucky. And Western went to Louisville this year. They played in the Yum Center once and played Louisville pretty tight for about two-thirds of that ball game, if memory serves. And you've got a Vinny Zolo guy who was recruited by Kentucky. So you've got that storyline. So there's several different storylines you could take with a Western and a UK game.
Got a tweet from Christopher at Tom Leach KY. The question we just put up a moment ago, do you think Kentucky got the toughest draw to get to the Final Four? Christopher says, well, obviously we know who got the easiest path, UNC perhaps. What a joke. Wouldn't expect anything less from the idiots in Indiana. Well, I wouldn't join him in that line of thinking. I actually think the committee did a better job this year than in recent years. I think they with a few blips actually did a pretty nice job when you look at the overall picture. But in the Midwest, I'm sure Carolina fans would debate that because Kansas is the two there, and Carolina has to go into St. Louis to perhaps play Kansas in an Elite Eight matchup.
And St. Louis and Kansas City, that whole stretch of I-70 is all Jayhawk. They are rock chalk Jayhawk. Missouri, while they are a 3-seed or a 2-seed, they don't have that great name, that attractive name in terms of basketball. Kansas does. That is a Jayhawk stretch of highway, and that place will be packed out for Jayhawk fans. But looking at that Midwest bracket, does Creighton scare you? Not really. Does Alabama? Not really. Temple, Cal, South Florida, Michigan? No, not really. Georgetown by name, if we were 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Georgetown bows out more often than not to. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if Belmont beat Georgetown.
Yeah, and St. Mary's is a West Coast team. You don't know a lot about them. You know Murray beat them, and by that a lot of people say, well, Murray beat them. Purdue has never really made a big run in the last 25 years at the NCAA. Even with Glenn Robinson, they got knocked out by Texas in the second round. And Kansas, that's a team, though, that has shown over the last years they are feast or famine. They're like Lute Olson at Arizona used to be. We're going to go to the Final Four or we're bowing out in the first two rounds. So we'll see about that one.
I don't see a whole lot of upsets here. I did have Temple coming out to the round of 16 to face Carolina, but I have in my bracket Carolina going on to the Final Four with a win over Kansas in the Elite Eight. We'll quickly touch on the other two brackets because that'll impact Kentucky, hopefully, in New Orleans. In the East, Syracuse is the second of the ones, and they, I think a lot of people believe, could have a potential second-round tough spot in Kansas State, should Kansas State advance past Southern Miss. I think a potential round of 32 game between Vanderbilt and Wisconsin could be a very good game a very competitive game. I would say, I never want to use the phrase "good to watch" when you're talking about Wisconsin. They can make it ugly basketball, but I think Vanderbilt's playing really well right now. Was not stunned that they won the game yesterday because they played Kentucky tough twice. I think it probably for Vanderbilt was. It was more of a be-all, end-all than it was for Kentucky to get that championship trophy in New Orleans for the SEC tournament. And I think Vanderbilt, if you look at their last month, they only lost 2 games to Kentucky and at Tennessee. So they've been playing more like the team that they were supposed to be in the preseason when they were picked top 10.
I believe they started 7 maybe in the polls. With Festus Ezeli came back and got into the rhythm, that was a totally different ball club because Vandy took it on the chin earlier, lost to Louisville. had another upset loss somewhere along the way. But when Azili
they
came
lost
back,
to Cleveland State,
yeah,
Indiana
right.
State. They had some strange losses.
When Azili came in, that solidified that team. That freed up Jenkins and Tinsley to do what they do on the outside. Taylor also, and Chingang, kind of the hatchet man. He's kind of one of the dirty guys in there, the garbage players. But when he came back, and when they played at UK a couple of weeks ago, he was enormous. And when he walked down on the court, I was like, wow, that's a big guy. And Vandy is scary enough that they could, if they faced a Syracuse, they get hot from three-point range. Syracuse plays the zone. And if there's one great way to bust a zone is by hitting 23-footers.
Florida State's a trendy pick from national analysts in this bracket. I actually have Ohio State beating Vandy to go to the Final Four, and then the other one would be out west. We'll quickly talk a little bit about that, where Michigan State is the 1 seed. Louisville and New Mexico in the round of 32 is if seeds hold would match up. I think I had Michigan State over Louisville in the round of 16. Had Missouri coming out there. I wanted to pull the trigger on Murray State over Marquette. I couldn't, so I've got Missouri beating Michigan State to go to the Final Four and face potentially Kentucky.
Murray State, a great team by their level of play. Once again, it's an OVC team, and unless they can beat someone who is a Marquette from a major conference, they are still going to be looked at as, well, we will see. That's why they're a 6 seed. How many 30-1 teams, 31-1 teams get a 6 seed? Not too many. When you look in there, you see Louisville and New Mexico, Long Beach State, Davidson. A lot of people I've been listening to nationally like New Mexico to make a run to the Sweet 16 to face a Michigan State. A lot of people not sold on Louisville, that they can score enough. That Big East basketball tournament was one of the ugliest tournaments I have ever seen. And I grew up in Louisville and at one time was a Cardinal fan many, many, many years ago before turning to the good side and away from the dark side. That's a weird team. Pitino's team this year is very awkward to watch. A lot like Florida. If they're not hitting threes, very susceptible to getting knocked off.
Let's turn back to Kentucky. We'll talk with you, Brian, a little bit about some key issues for the Cats coming off this just second loss of the season. How do they respond to this loss? Was it, quote-unquote, the proverbial good loss that people have been debating for a while? Did the Cats need one of those good losses? Calipari talked a lot this past week about swagger versus arrogance, the confidence that comes from what he says demonstrated performance. As the cell phone goes off, I got to turn that down. Getting tweets in. Swagger coming from the demonstrated performance of stepping on somebody's throat and just knowing that you're the best team. Whereas arrogance, and I think that's where he saw them slipping into in this tournament, that they take things for granted. They not think they're better than they are, because I think they're very good, but just that they, I think, more take things for granted, don't fully or properly respect their opponent. And what he talked about in one of our pregame interviews is he said he doesn't want these guys to 20 years from now have regrets saying, why did we get overconfident or arrogant or whatever? Why did we let that happen to ourselves instead of staying focused and winning the championship that we should have won? He doesn't want them to have those kinds of regrets, so that's why he's pushing this so hard. He said in our pregame, he said, that's why people see me looking so mean or acting so mean on the sideline. So those are some key issues for the Cats. How do you think they'll respond to this loss?
I think that the younger guys will be okay because just to touch on what you mentioned about 20 years later, we have to remember, and all of the fans have to remember one thing. These kids are 18 years old. Anthony Davis turned 19. They're 20 years old. They don't understand 20 years down the road. We did not understand 20 years down the road when we were teenagers. One thing they must do is, I think this is where Darius Miller comes up and says, okay, I'm the captain, I'm the senior here. This is how we will handle it. Talking to a couple of people who were around UK after the loss, that it wasn't that bad. That it was, okay, we lost, so be it, let's go with it. Let's move on. I think one reason Cal may have been a little frustrated with playing the 3 games in 3 days, that doesn't fit this type of a team. Plays an Ironman 6.5, 7 players. Yep. In 3 games in 3 days. That's not healthy for a team that doesn't have a lot of bench help.
In the next tournament, that's not an issue. You
right.
a day off between games, but 3 days. I think you're right. I think Kentucky was dead-legged at the end of that game yesterday, and Vandy plays 9 guys and regularly, and I think that was just the matchup for that set of circumstances that Kentucky couldn't quite kind of ran out of gas to close it out when it looked like they were going to, which they've done so many times. Brian, thanks for stopping by.
No problem. Thank you, Tom.
It's Brian Milam from here at WKYT. Dave Baker will be joining us shortly, and then we're going to get Mike Pratt on the line here in a little bit. I want to take a look at another graphic here as we'll start going through some potential opponents. The first 2 opponents is what we'll look at for the Wildcats as we take a look first at Sean Wood's Delta Devils of Mississippi Valley State, the champions of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. And my computer mouse here is being temperamental on me, so let's see what we get. There we go. Mississippi Valley State, champions of the SWAC, both regular season and tournament. Now, if you're not familiar with Sean's story, his team, they play a lot of what are called guarantee games, where you take your program to a place like a Kentucky or a North Carolina or a Duke. You get a big check for your athletics department, and the opponent expects you to lose convincingly and take the check and leave. And 99 times out of 100 that happens, and that's what has happened about 100 times out of 100 for most of the schools, including Mississippi Valley State. So they start off, I think it was 1-11, but they gain some valuable experience from playing against those schools. And what Sean was on the radio show on the Leach Report on WLAP with me this morning, and he said he took a different approach with those games this year. Rather than beat his guys up for not winning those games for some breakdowns they had, he focused entirely on just getting better. What could they do to get better from one game to the next through that experience, because they knew they were going to be beat. He wasn't telling his guys, look, you're going to get killed, but here's what we need to do. He was coaching them to win, but then didn't beat them up afterward. And then consequently, they went into their league. They went 17-1. Then they won the conference tournament. So now they're facing Western Kentucky Tuesday night in Dayton in the first of the first 4 games. This is the 4th NCAA appearance, the first for Sean Woods as a head coach, so it's a nice time for him. President Obama will be there. He and the British Prime Minister have a meeting scheduled at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, so they're going to take in some basketball while they're there. This is a team that shoots a lot of threes, Mississippi Valley State. Almost 40% of their total field goal attempts are behind the three-point line. They also tend to turn it over. They turn it over more than they force turnovers, so that would be an issue for Mississippi Valley State if they got into a matchup with a Kentucky in a second round, or actually it's not the second. Yeah, it would be the second round matchup with Kentucky at the Yum Center. Now, if Mississippi Valley State does not prevail, Western Kentucky would. A team that comes out of the Sun Belt Conference with an unlikely run to the championship there. And Western Kentucky making its 22nd NCAA tournament appearance. Its first under Ray Harper. Ray Harper took over at midseason for Ken McDonald, and we take a look at Western Kentucky. They have not shot it well. Only 31% on threes, only 40% on their field goal attempts for this season. We need to see if we can change that graphic there on over to Western Kentucky. And let me get this unclicked here. Told you we're flying by the seat of our pants a little bit. We'll have to adjust on the fly and see if we can get the Western Kentucky. Western is also a team that, like Kentucky, is very young and not nearly as talented. There you see Western, 40% they shoot from the field. They have 5 freshmen in their rotation and only 1 senior for Western Kentucky. So that is a team that is very young but has gotten hot at the right time. I tend to think they'll advance. Normally you wouldn't see a Sun Belt Conference team in the quote-unquote play-in game. Western, with a losing record because of the hits they took early, finds itself there. So I think they're a better team than a Mississippi Valley State would normally see in this spot. So I think Western Kentucky probably will advance on to meet the Wildcats. And then we'll take a look a little bit later on at a couple of other opponents that Kentucky, the 2 opponents Kentucky could face in the next round, either UConn or Iowa State. But right now, let's bring in Mr. Baker, who has just joined us here in the studios.
Did you see what I just did?
It's a nice casual setting we have here.
Well,
kind of like the old Mike Douglas show. We bring people in and off the set.
And who was the producer of the Mike Douglas show?
I have no idea.
Roger Ailes.
Was he really?
Yeah. guy who runs Fox News now.
There's a lot of useless information up there, like
Thank
there
you,
is here.
Thank you. I was looking to see how the picture looked, and I just put my head over in front of there, so it was like an eclipse in front of the camera. I'm like, oh, that's a camera. I better stop that. Sorry.
I didn't notice that. This is live TV online. This
Yes,
is adding
it
a third dimension, if you will, to
This
it.
is the technical version of Wayne's World, is what
Yes,
it is.
it is. This is our basement here at KYT in
Awesome, dude.
Aurora, Kentucky.
Awesome, dude.
We don't have a top 10 list, unfortunately. We'll work on that for next
Yeah.
time. You were courtside with us yesterday.
Yes.
Got us the great story right off the bat. Nice thing about radio, Dave, go find out why Michael's not starting. And you came back, and I think the phrase was darndest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. People ask you all the time. They hear about the talent of these kids. They're even better kids. I mean, they're just good people. And for Gilchrist to offer to start to get Darius off the schneid, and it worked. And they've got great heads on their shoulders. Yesterday we were getting on the plane. And, you hear about rookies getting hazed all the time, but I'm walking back there, and I don't fly in a plane like you guys do all the time. It was to get back here for our selection show, and Anthony Davis goes, watch, man, there's some water on the floor. I said, what? He goes, watch, there's water on the floor. And so I make this step over it, and he's like, gotcha. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you really kidding me? You're going to do this to me today? But I mean, that's the kind of kids they are.
Well, the funny thing is, too, they lost a game. And
Yes.
people will invariably ask, what was it like on the plane?
Oh, I bet
How
that was a bad
were they?
plane ride.
I said, they're 18, 19 years old. They
Hey.
put on their headphones. They listen to their iPod. You can't tell whether they've won or lost.
You should really see Tom Leach in some beats. I mean, Dr. Dre would be very proud.
But they're
it's-
resilient.
And
They bounce
weren't
back.
partying or anything either. I mean,
No.
they have a tendency to keep it in a perspective that oftentimes we and fans have difficulty doing.
They know that it's now about not the 24-game winning streak that they lost, but
Right.
the 6-game winning streak that they need.
Sure.
Get a few more tweets in at Tom Leach KY. One of the questions: who do you think will win between Mississippi Valley State and Western Kentucky? So far, most of the votes coming in are for the Delta Devils. Beth going with MVSU. It'll be a great storyline with Sean Woods. Terry MVSU. Chase goes for Western Kentucky. And let's talk a little bit about the potential path to a Final Four. We'll start with the path to the Sweet 16 down in Atlanta. Kentucky fans are happy about the prospect of being in Atlanta. Got to get there first, and certainly think they'll advance against either Mississippi Valley State or Western on Thursday night. But committee did them no favors if it ends up being Kentucky and UConn in the second round.
Oh, I disagree with you, my friend.
Oh, really? Ah, good.
Okay, here we go. Okay, Jeff Hathaway, as we talked yesterday, is the guy who was the athletics director at UConn. To say that he and Jim Calhoun didn't get along would be putting it about as mildly as you could. I mean, by people who are there, these guys never spoke. And it was Hathaway who believed that Calhoun got him as the AD. So what I'm saying to you is Jeff Hathaway knows what kind of team UConn's got this year, and he knows what kind of team Kentucky's got this year. And in what could be Jim Calhoun's final game as coach, depending on how things are going, remember they're still staring down the barrel of the NCAA gun, he put UConn and Jim Calhoun squarely in John Calipari's crosshairs, and Cal will be diplomatic about it, but there's nobody that Cal would rather hang one on than the guy who refers to him as Johnny Clam Chowder.
You're right about that part of it.
Yeah.
UConn's a team that was preseason top 10, started 12-1. I think the matchup issue is the fact that they're going to be physical and they got a big guy in Drummond. They've just been a team that's all over the map. If they play the same way they played the last time they were in the Yum Center, Kentucky will win by 50.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think that this team just, I've been reading some articles upstairs and everything. I think this team, I don't know how much they need to refocus. I think they just need to recharge.
That's well put. Yeah.
I mean, even all the games in AAU play that this team played before. I mean, I talked to Anthony Davis a little bit about it over at Cal's house last night. I mean, Festus Ezeli is a man.
Oh.
I mean, Anthony Davis is a kid, very talented kid. Festus Ezeli is a man.
Buried him under the basket. There was nothing Anthony could do.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. But, and I think Anthony, he traveled back up to Chicago last week, with the death of his grandfather. And, this is a long grind for these guys, keeping up with schoolwork and everything. First time they've been through it. And I think that, they just need to freshen up. I think even though they've got 2 games this week, it'll help the fact that they're here and they're close and they don't have to get on a plane and and then they get down to business.
Cal didn't use fatigue as an excuse. I asked him about it in the post game.
Right.
Yeah, and Vandy played at night, but I think they had an easier first game, and I think they go 9 deep, and 3 games in 3 days, I think, did take a toll on Kentucky. I think they looked dead down the last 5 minutes of that game. And because the book on Kentucky is to play them physically like Vanderbilt did. You talked about Azili. And if you're Anthony Davis and you are 220 pounds against a guy who's 270 in Azili, and that happens the day before with Patrick Young and the day before, that wears on you. It takes a toll. And so by the 3rd day, you don't have your legs.
Sure.
Shots came up short. Decisions, they didn't make some of the best decisions. I thought they took, for lack of a better term, sometimes they took shots that were on the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Rather than, drive it in there, take more contact.
Right.
I'm just going to knock down this jumper. And they didn't hit him.
I will say to you as well that one of the most interesting things I've heard during this postseason was what Cal told you in the pregame show yesterday. When you ask him, what's the message to your team? And he said, and I'm just paraphrasing here, but correct me where I'm wrong, but basically, we don't need any drama.
Yeah.
We don't need drama at this time of year. We don't need you listening to other voices. You need to be focused in on what we're doing here and what we've got going on. And I thought that was incredibly insightful.
And I think that's where if a loss can be good, I think you're probably of this feeling too. You don't necessarily have to lose. Every team doesn't have to lose if you're on a long winning streak. But if he saw some of that happening, then maybe this causes them to tune all that out.
And it's obvious, not only because of what he said to you, but I think it's obvious he saw it coming as well, because we talked about it on the radio, and I don't know how many people heard it, but the night before the opener.
Literally millions.
Stop it. Not as many as there are on the World Wide Web. But the night before the first game, he had Billy Hunter, who is the executive director of the NBA Players Association, speak to the team. And basically the message was, guys, listen, you're going to have all kinds of people chirping in your head. You got plenty of time to think about this NBA stuff. Go ahead and get this 6 weeks out of the way, and there'll be plenty of time to make
You don't
your
think that
decision.
was just an accident?
I told
Billy happened to just be walking down the hall, and he said, "Hey, Billy, come in like we pulled you in." That's not how that happened.
He was not over at that restaurant where Buffy Barnhart saw Ellen DeGeneres and Portia. Billy Hunter was there for a reason. He was not there for the Brad Pitt fundraiser in New Orleans.
Before we let you go, real quick, we'll take a look. If it's not UConn that Kentucky would face in a second-round matchup,
Yes.
it would be Iowa State out of the Big 12 as we take a look at some of their vital stats. 13th NCAA appearance for the Cyclones. 42% of their shots are threes. They're one of the most prolific three-point shooting teams in all of the country. 38% is what they hit, but not much depth on the front line. And they did have nice wins over Kansas and Baylor, but I think that would not be a scary matchup for Kentucky.
No, and I don't think there is a scary matchup for Kentucky in the bracket.
If Kentucky is Kentucky.
That's correct. I mean, I was never afraid of Ohio State, but I was like, man, if you get Jared Sullinger on a particular night, I've been scared to death all year long of Syracuse because of how well they play that zone. I'm scared to death of Michigan State because of the way that they play. And Tom Izzo is such a good postseason coach. But I don't see a team like that in the South bracket, and I think Kentucky answered a lot of those questions. That they played Vanderbilt well from outside that 3-point line. I thought Vandy was guilty of the same sort of fatigue and everything that Kentucky was, but I thought they played them well. I'm sure Cal is watching this and tuned in as he's getting ready, but if I'm hoping to see him sometime later today. I think and everybody's got their own opinion. I think they need to go back to dribble drive. I think what's happening is on all those handoffs and everything out front now, everybody's switching defenses and everything. They're pushing the defense farther out. Okay, well, let's look at it. Let's look at Teague. Let's look at Gilchrist. Let's go ahead and look at Terrence Jones. Let's go ahead and look at DeRon Lamb or Darius. Clear it out for any one of those guys. And I don't think there are too many people in college basketball that can guard any of those guys one-on-one. And you know what? When somebody comes over to help, liven up to the big fella and just let him finish it out.
Absolutely.
And go ahead and change it up a little bit and say, okay, all right, let's go.
Sounds good. Appreciate you stopping by.
How did you get all this work out of Tim Coles today? Here, he's Dr. Digital here at WKYT.
Dr. Digital, I like that.
Dr. Digital.
I remember Dr. Dre, Dr. Detroit. I'm sure you remember.
Oh, how could you not remember
Digital? Dr. Digital.
We'll get him like a hat or something.
There we go.
That says that for it's not Valentine's Day. It's St. Patrick's Day. That's what it is.
That's right.
I'll try not to put my hand in front of the camera anymore.
The wearing o' the green. We're going to take a commercial break. And
I'd have stayed if I'd have known that. I thought you were just going to keep going.
We'll be right back in just a moment. It's the Big Blue Bracket Breakdown. Tell you what, before we take this break, let me remind you a couple of things. One is the March Mayhem contest, WKYT.com/brackets. You can pick against me, Dave, and other celebrities. WKYT.com/brackets for the March Mayhem contest. You can win some really neat stuff, including a 55-inch plasma TV, something like the one right behind me. So make sure you check that out. Also, don't forget to participate in our weekly Big Blue polls on the newscasts. You can tune in on Monday mornings on the Leach Report on WLAP AM 630 in Lexington or in Louisville on WKJK AM 1080. And you can, at that point, hear what the poll will be for the week. It's a Twitter poll, and this week we're asking you, how confident are you that Kentucky will make it back to the Final Four for a second straight year? 100%, 90%, 75%, or 50%. So here's how you vote on the weekly Twitter poll for the Big Blue poll from the Leach Report and WKYT. You go to @WKYT, hashtag 100, hashtag 75, hashtag 90, hashtag 50, whatever your vote is. We're going to take a break, and we will continue in just a moment. Get the commercial rolling. Oh, tell you what. There we go. We're going to have, as I told you, we're kind of taking this on the fly. So let's go to the commercial, and you're seeing a tweet up there we'll talk a little bit more about later. That's Derek Anderson, former Wildcat member of the 96 champs, told us on the radio show today via Twitter. We were asking what potential obstacles are there for Kentucky on the way back to the Final Four, and he said that it would, as you can see up on the screen, he says it's ourselves. We can beat anybody if we pay attention to detail and we play our way. No team is a threat because we are the hunters. Hashtag 8. That's DA, Derek Anderson, with his thoughts on what Kentucky needs to do to get back to the Final Four. And it'll be down in New Orleans when the Wildcats. I'm trying to have trouble here with this computer getting the commercial to play. The Wildcats try to get it back to New Orleans, and of course it would be in the Superdome next time when they play against potentially Missouri, Michigan State. If they make it, if seeds hold, it would be Kentucky and Michigan State in a Final Four. The committee now does seed this so that theoretically the top one seed would play the lowest ranked of the one seeds, and that would be Michigan State. So our producer here, Mr. Coles, is trying to help us out getting this commercial to fire. We want to be able to bring up Mr. Pratt on the line and get him to join us and get his thoughts on the Wildcats going into the NCAA tournament on Thursday night. We'll come right back with Mike Pratt. We are back here on the Big Blue Bracket Breakdown, trying to work out a couple of technical issues and check in with Mike Pratt, get his thoughts on the Kentucky matchup. In the meantime, let me pull up the old Verizon Droid here and talk a little bit about some of your tweets that are coming in. What do you think Kentucky's path will be to the Final Four is another question we put out there. From Thomas, he thinks it's going to be UK, Wichita State, UNLV, and Duke. Actually, it couldn't be UNLV because they would be on the Duke side. But Kentucky, I'm sorry, he thinks that'll be the Sweet 16 matchup. That's what it is. Kentucky, Wichita State, UNLV, and Duke. I think he very well may be right. I did not pick UNLV. I wavered on that, and I went with Baylor. But I think Baylor, UNLV, Duke, those are the three teams that'll come out of that bottom part of the bracket. So I think it'll be...
Working at WKYT, first-class television station, without question. the people, the equipment, everything that WKYT stands for is class. And to be back now involved with what I consider the top-notch station, not only in Lexington but in the whole area, is an honor and a privilege. And it's my television home. No matter where I've been for the past few years, WKYT has always been home.
You ready?
Oh, okay.
All right, we've got Mike Pratt on the line with us. Mike, we're flying by the seat of our pants here because we're just at came out of a break. Are you with me on the line? We're live on WKYT.com.
I'm here.
You are there.
I'm
Good
here.
man.
Yes.
Good man. I knew you would come through.
There you go.
I'm better late than never than getting to you. I told you to be a little bit earlier, but thank you for hanging in there. If we'll just
no
visit
problem
for a few minutes. Mike Pratt is with us, my broadcast partner on the UK radio network, as we take a look at Kentucky and the Big Blue bracket breakdown and some of the potential matchups. Mississippi Valley State, Western Kentucky. Give me a quick thought on who wins that game in Dayton for the right to face Kentucky.
I don't know much about Mississippi Valley State except that Sean Woods does coach there. I know Ray Harper, and we were all so happy to see him get that job, and he certainly has motivated Western Kentucky. I think they're going to be a tough out for Mississippi Valley State. But that game, that's you take a flyer on that if you're a betting man. So I'm pulling for Western Kentucky, I guess. No Coach Harper, and I think Western Kentucky wins it.
Derek Anderson, former member of the Untouchables in '96, he this morning on the radio show on WLAP, the Leach Report, I asked, what do you think was the biggest obstacle for Kentucky to make it back to a Final Four? And I got a tweet from Derek at Tom Leach KY, at Tom Leach KY, the tweet. And he said that he thinks it's Kentucky is its own biggest obstacle. If they take care of their own business, then they'll be back in New Orleans. Give me your thoughts on what comes out, what Kentucky needs to learn from this loss against Vanderbilt.
Well, I think Derek Anderson's 100% right. That's true about all teams. If you take care of your own business, then talent will work its way out and come out. The most talented team will win 8 out of 10 times. There's always some goofy thing happens you can't control, but he is exactly right. I think a lot of good things came out of New Orleans. I think if you listen real close to Cal and you understand some of the things he says, Tom, as you do, and I do, being around him, he spins a lot of things, and he says a lot of things for motivational purposes for his team. And he seemed to think his team was, what did he call them, arrogant?
Well, he talks a lot about the difference between swagger and arrogance. So,
yeah.
And I think he saw it. I don't know if he wanted to fully commit to that they were arrogant, but I think he certainly, my impression was he saw them moving from the good side of that line to the bad side of that line.
Yeah, and we used to call that cocky, okay?
Right, exactly.
Teams used to say we were cocky. Kentucky is a cocky team. You've heard that about all kinds of people. But saying that, I think this team was beat up physically. I think the physicality of those 3 games beat them up. And, yeah, everybody's tired. Everybody has tired legs, okay? Yeah. But they were physically beat up. I mean,
because
they were
of the way people played them, they had to be. The way they were played was different from the way Vandy was played, so it took a greater toll over 3 days.
Yeah, it did. And one after the other, the bruises, the bumps, and if you're a football player, you understand that. And you do it in 3 days. You don't have that situation in the NCAA, okay? This team was built to take advantage of its length, its height, and its athleticism. Would you not agree?
Absolutely.
Okay, it wasn't built to grab, beat on people, push, and shove. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Vandy. They were terrific, okay? And when you get in a game like Kentucky was in, you have to make up your mind that okay, that's the way it's going to be called, and I will play accordingly. That's what you have to make up your mind on. And but at the end of the day, I thought Anthony Davis, he was just beat up. He had no energy. He was tired of getting beat on, tired of getting held. I thought Teague and Lamb both were tired of that. I think they got beat up pretty good. The guy that seemed to hold up the best was Terrence from A to Z, 1 game to 3. Yeah. Then the guy that came alive, and the last one was Darius Miller. How about that?
Yeah, with the start. How about that?
Yeah. I think if you have the physicality to go to war with Kentucky at the rim, I think Billy Donovan said this, and I would concur. You've got to challenge them at the rim. You've got to play them at the rim physically. Then you got to make some shots. And there's not a whole lot of teams that can do that. I mean, it takes a very special team. I'm not so sure Vandy can do that as effectively, and they didn't on a one-game deal. But they caught them at the tail end when the bruises and the bangs and the soreness was there. Okay? And they played well. Give Vandy a lot of credit. We saw a Vandy team we all thought at the beginning of the year. Azili close to 100%, and he was challenged by playing Anthony Davis. You like to see that about a guy. He wasn't willing to back up. He wanted that challenge from Anthony. Anthony wanted the challenge from him. He just couldn't deliver. That's all.
Getting some tweets into another question we just put out. How many SEC teams will advance onto the Sweet 16 of the NCAA? So how many of those 4 SEC teams will make it onto the round of 16 in the NCAA tournament? Derek says only one, and you know who that will be? Well, I'm assuming that would be the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah.
We get DT tweeting in. He says that he's picking all 4. He thinks Bama can beat UNC if they play well, and that Florida is peaking and could upset Missouri. Drew says Vandy and UK. CC Yates says just one. Shake and Bake 8 tweets in at Tom Leach KY. Only one SEC team is going to make it to the Sweet 16. What do you think, Mike?
Did somebody say they thought Alabama could beat UNC?
Yes, somebody did say that.
Oh, please. Oh, please. Please.
I like that answer.
I think, too, Vandy has a very good chance in Kentucky. I think Florida doesn't have the inside game to go with the outside, and Bama's going to be okay. Win one, maybe lose one, but they just have a hard time scoring sometimes. They're like a lot of teams in the SEC. They have a hard time scoring.
They need to be in the Big East.
Yeah, they need to be. They're the beast of the SEC instead of the beast of the East. But
they need to be in the Big East if they have trouble scoring, is what I was saying. They'd be right at home.
No, you're right. And I just jokingly call it the beast. They think they're the beast, but we all know better. But no, I think Vandy could parlay this. They now have the confidence. They got the monkey off their back as it relates to Kentucky. And this is an experienced team. Do not forget, this is an experienced team. The other thing is, if I'm Coach Stallings, I put that chip on their shoulder. Look what you guys have done the last few years. This is your last chance to make up for some real upsets teams that you played on that were upset. I like Vandy. I like Vandy.
Vandy, I think if they can get past Wisconsin in a potential second game, I think could be a great matchup against that Syracuse zone with the shooters that Vandy has. Actually, the bracket I'm going to fill out for the contest, I'm going to have Vandy going to the Elite Eight.
I wouldn't. That would take a little bit of a reach for me, but I wouldn't go against it either. I think this Wisconsin Vandy game is going to be a wrestling match, and Wisconsin, they're tough at home, but they struggled at times, with the exception of the game in Columbus on the road. They don't score a whole lot, and they want to grind it. Vandy's capable of grinding it. Both teams shoot it well. Vandy's going to have the advantage in athleticism. I just think there's something there with Vandy this year.
Let's go back to Kentucky's path after they would play either Mississippi Valley State or Western Kentucky on Thursday night. They'd get either UConn or Iowa State. Give me your thoughts on what potential problems could be caused by either.
Well, Iowa State, everybody seems to think they got a shot to beat underachieving Connecticut team. Connecticut's very athletic, and their team will take you to the physicality level. I don't know where they are as far as playing together. I mean, if you look at their year, they've been up and down. Of course, Calhoun was out a while, but they have not fulfilled their promise. At this point in time, you pretty much are what you are. Now, Kimball Walker bailed them out last year. I thought Lamb would be a star player this year. He's been good, but not great. I think that little Boatwright, I watch him. I don't like their body language, and I think he's kind of a gunner, and he's a freshman, and I just don't like that team, although they match up with the physicality piece with the Cats, and they are very athletic. But some people don't think they can get by Iowa State, who's a good perimeter shooting team. So that'll be interesting. That won't be a walkover for UConn. That will not be a walkover. I'm probably going to go with the Big 12 team in that game. I'm going with Iowa State to pull an upset.
Let's talk a little bit about which 4 teams you think would make it to Atlanta for the Sweet 16 in the South region. I'm assuming Kentucky would be there. Who else would you see coming out to the Sweet 16 in the Atlanta region?
You know, and I don't have the bracket in front of me, but I believe it's Wichita State with IU. I haven't spent much time studying it. Wichita State's a dangerous team. IU now is a wounded team.
Without Verdell Jones, yeah.
Without Verdell Jones. Wichita State, to me, that's a toss-up game, okay, because of Verdell Jones being out. Mm-hmm. Indiana has struggled on the road all year. I don't know what it is. So, I mean, that's a toss-up game.
I've got Wichita State coming out there to face Kentucky.
Well, I'd rather see Indiana because I think our guys might want to have a payback situation. I've
got Baylor and Duke in the bottom, although I toyed with the idea of picking UNLV, but I went Baylor and Duke.
Well, Vegas could be there very easy. I think I might go with, I don't know, it's hard not to say it, you know, it's hard not to. Lon Kruger's a terrific coach, and Vegas has a lot of athleticism. We know that bothers Duke a lot. With Kelly being out, you know, I kind of look at a matchup in there with Baylor and Duke. I'm going to go with Duke, and I'm going to go with Baylor beating Duke.
Yeah, we're on the same line. I've got Kentucky beating Baylor to go to the Final Four.
Yeah. Baylor, very athletic, built much like Kentucky, okay? Built much like Kentucky. Athletic, long. Some people I talk to, I've only seen them on TV. Some people I talk to think they're a bit soft. So they're a team that's not going to – they're going to mirror Kentucky in many ways. It'd be a very interesting game. They'll get up and down the floor. That'll be a very interesting game.
Mike, one last thought. We'll let you go. Kentucky comes out. I don't know if you've filled out a bracket all the way out to the Final Four. Just curious as who your other 3 Final Four teams would be besides Kentucky.
I haven't, but I don't think Alabama's going to knock UNC. So I think UNC is going to be there. I think they're very good. I think Kentucky will get there. And I haven't studied it long enough. Michigan State is always dangerous, but I haven't studied enough to find my other 2. I'm gonna have to do a little. It's only Monday, Tom, man.
Hey, this thing starts tomorrow now.
Those games, those aren't ball games. Those are play-in games. That's
but they may make you turn your bracket in there.
Do they? The guys I play with don't. They write those off. They get down to the nitty-gritty when you start it up.
You serious analysts are like that.
You're funny today. You must have got a good night's sleep.
There, I did. It's amazing what that'll do for you, isn't it?
It's a trick, isn't it? It's a real trick.
All right. Thank you, partner.
See you, buddy.
It's Mike Pratt, my broadcast partner on the radio network, with some of his thoughts. Does a great job of breaking down the game. So we appreciate him giving us a little bit of time today. Tell you what, we're going to try to get to another break, and we'll take that. And when we come back, we'll come to a few more of your tweets and to some of our questions we put out there, and we'll get to those to close out the show today. Mayhem, yeah. We are back on our Big Blue Bracket Breakdown, our final segment here with you today, and we appreciate all of you guys tuning in today. Again, it's the first time we've done this out of the studio. Thought this, go ahead and take these headphones off since I'm finished with the conversation with Mike, and first time we've done this out of the studios here, the internet studio, and maybe do some more of these things in the future, but thought it worked well for this particular show with the brackets. And we have the brackets contest going on at WKYT.com/brackets, the March Mayhem contest. You can pick against celebrities. I've been telling you what my some overview what my bracket's going to look like. I've got a Final Four of Kentucky, then Missouri out of the West. I've got North Carolina out of the Midwest, and out of the East, I'm taking Ohio State to come out of there. So that's my Final Four, with Kentucky beating North Carolina in the championship game. You'll be able to go online and pick against me, Dave Baker, other celebrities, experts, whatever you want to call it. That's WKYT.com/brackets. And you won't just have the fun of competing against us. You can win great prizes like a TV, much like the one that's behind me, or an iPad. Really some neat stuff that you can win. So make sure you take advantage of that, WKYT.com/brackets. Keep tuned in, of course, here on WKYT all week long for great coverage from the tournament. It's just down the road, just down I-64 in Louisville, so they'll be able to send the whole team down there to give you coverage of the Cats beginning their NCAA tournament run, hopefully back to the Final Four and getting a return trip to New Orleans in just over a couple of weeks. And don't forget, you can tune in my radio show, The Leach Report, on WLAP AM 630 in Lexington every morning between 9 and 10, and we'll be talking about the tournaments coming up tomorrow on the show. We're going to have Larry Vaught and also Ken Pomeroy, who does the KenPom.com stats site. Kentucky's one of the more efficient teams in the country. I think it's Missouri and Kentucky 1-2 in offensive efficiency. Kentucky's also in the top 5 of defensive efficiency, so we'll be talking with Ken about that. But let me get to a few of your tweets. We're asking for some of your thoughts on who will make it to Atlanta. We asked Mike about that. Justin tweets at Tom Leach KY. He's got Kentucky, Wichita State, Baylor, and Duke getting there. And here's another one from Jack: Kentucky, Wichita State, UNLV, and Duke. So there's another thought for UNLV. Wichita State seems to be the trendy pick. I think a lot of that is because of the injury to Verdell Jones, and I think Indiana is vulnerable. I thought they played well without him in the Big Ten tournament, but sometimes that over a little bit of as time starts to pass, that injury has an even greater impact. And I think Wichita State, straight up, if Indiana were fully healthy, I'd give Wichita State a good shot to get the win. So without Verdell Jones, I give Wichita State an even better shot. So I think Kentucky will probably, my pick is they'll be facing Wichita State in the round of 16, and I think they'll be facing Baylor. The storyline would be great if it's Kentucky and Duke 20 years later playing for a spot in the Final Four. I've thought all year Duke was overrated, so if that comes about, I'd like Kentucky's chances. I know Dave disagrees with me, but I think UConn is a potential problem in the second round if that's who Kentucky faces. If they win their first game and UConn beats Iowa State. I had Jim O'Connell, as I mentioned earlier on the radio show today. Jim covers a ton of college basketball all over the country, but he's based up in the Northeast, so he sees more Big East basketball than I think others. And he covered the Big East tournament, and he said he thought UConn was a different team than they were 3 weeks ago when they played in that tournament. So he thinks that they're getting back to themselves. He says they played with a chip on their shoulder, and with Calhoun back on the bench, that's how they play best. And so he thought they looked like the real UConn in that tournament last week. And he made a good point that the big guys in Kentucky's side of the bracket, you've got potentially a matchup with UConn in the round of 32 and Drummond on the inside. Then you've got Wichita State and Indiana, who both have big, beefy guys at the 5 spot, that those are the kind of big men that can cause the most problems for Anthony Davis. So Jim thought that's why Kentucky probably had the toughest draw of any of the 1 seeds with the way it's set up in the South region. We'll see how it plays out over the next 3 weeks before we crown another national champion. Will the Kentucky Wildcats get to hang that 8th banner? They are the number 1 team, still number 1 in the country going into the tournament despite the loss because everybody else lost in the past week. Also just came out today, the U.S. Basketball Writers Association named Anthony Davis a first-team All-American. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist was named to the second-team All-America squad. So congratulations to those 2 Wildcats, and I think you'll see them and the rest of the Cats back at their best come Thursday night down in Louisville when Kentucky plays either Western or Mississippi Valley State. Thank you for joining us here on the Big Blue Bracket Breakdown, and we'll see you down the road.